Hello guys, and welcome to my how to build episode on Magicka Sorcerer. So, during this video guys, we're going to go over the different abilities that you can use for a Magicka Sorc. We're going to be talking about them from the view of a Magicka Sorc, and we're going to be taking a look at the Sorcerer passives from the view of a Magicka Sorc as well. We're also going to be talking about buildcraft, talking about not only just a damage Sorc, but tank Sorc, etc. And we're also going to be taking a look at and talking about a few different sets that go well with Magicka Sorc and stuff like that. So, this is a great video if you're a little bit newer to Sorc, and if you're looking to build a Magicka Sorc, this will help you out a lot. So let's jump right into it, guys. Okay, so let's start off in our first tree here, our Dark Magic tree. So, to begin, we have our first ability here, Crystal Shard, morphed to either Crystal Fragment or Crystal Blast. This is your very powerful single target ability for a Magicka Sorc. It is not necessarily as spammable because it does have a cast time of 1 second, as you can see here, so you will not be able to spam it as effectively as other abilities, but if we take the Crystal Fragments morph, as we can see here, casting any other Magicka ability has a 35% chance to cause your next Crystal Fragments to be instant, deal 20% more damage, and cost 50% less Magicka. So there you have it. The Crystal Frag's first morph here will allow you to cast this ability for free on a 35% chance when you're casting any other magic costing ability. Something to note about this particular morph is that it increases the damage by 20%. This is not a Major Empower buff. This is a separate 20% damage increase buff, so you can stack that buff with Major Empower, allowing you to increase your outgoing damage by 40% for that particular Crystal Frag. And now we have the Crystal Blast morph. So this functions in the same way as Crystal Frags, except we no longer get the ability for it to have an instant cast proc. Instead, we always have to deal with the 1 second channel time. The damage on it is still very high, and the Crystal Blast morph allows you to do AoE damage to the target that you hit. So whatever target you hit, people around them are going to take a little bit of damage as well. And as you can see, it's actually quite a bit of damage for the AoE still, so it's still a very powerful single target / AoE ability if we morph to Crystal Blast. For the most part, Crystal Fragments is usually the better morph, allowing you to whip out those instant cast frags for 20% more damage. This is probably the most common ability you'll see other Magicka Sorcs throwing around is Crystal Fragments, because it is their most powerful single target ability that they have access to. Okay, so let's move on, guys. The next ability we have is Encase. So this is a really strong ability. Call Daedric Shards to the earth and immobilize enemies in front of you for 5.4 seconds. 5.4 seconds is a long time to be immobilized. It's a very long duration immobilize. And as we can see here, it has a 18 by 6 meter radius, so you have quite a large radius in front of you when you cast this ability, and anyone in front of you is going to get immobilized. Our different morphs here, we've got Restraining Prison, which puts a slow on the enemies after the effect ends for 4.8 seconds, and then we've got Shattering Prison, which is going to deal a bit of Magicka damage when the effect ends. And as we can see here, the damage on this is only 3k, so it's not too terribly high for Magicka damage on our Shattering Prison. Which morph you want to choose is really up to you guys. I think if you're going for a more damage centralized Sorc, go for Shattering Prison, and Restraining Prison is an excellent kind of CC ability. It's awesome for PvP, AoE CC, a large group of players. Sorc has access to a lot of movement in their class as well through our Storm Calling tree, so using a slow like this that puts a massive immobilize and then maybe even the snare after is a great way to really contain a group of players when you're fighting them, to make it very hard for them to move around and chase you. Alright, the next ability we have down is Rune Prison. So what this ability does is you use it on an enemy and it will imprison the enemy, disorienting them for 18.1 seconds, and if you attack them again, the disorient is broken. So this is a really cheap kind of long distance disorient, and then if you hit the opponent with any other attack, it'll break the stun that you put on them. So we have two different morphs kind of for this ability. One is Defensive Rune. So what this does is it takes the ability and turns it into kind of a self buff. So you no longer have to attack an opponent with it. What it'll do is it will stun the next opponent that attacks you. And this lasts for a long time, 1.2 minute duration. So quite a long time on this buff to be up, 72 seconds as you can see there. We've got Rune Cage as the other morph. So what this is going to do is leave it as the way it was before, so it is a casted ability that you'll cast on a target, and now what happens is the disorient is only broken if the enemy takes direct damage and not damage over time. So this is kind of an interesting ability because it opens up kind of like a dot a dot kind of sorc DPS combo that you could use against a player and they'd be stunned during the DPS combo. The only kind of downside to this is that the sorc does not have very many powerful damage over time abilities. We've got a few strong AoEs as damage over time, but otherwise we have to rely almost exclusively on weapon skills and other skills in order to get other powerful dots on the sorc. So this is a cool ability, but it doesn't really synergize so well with sorc, in my opinion, simply because we don't have access to a lot of dots on a Magicka sorc. I think this would be a lot better for a stam sorc. And then Defensive Rune, of course, is just all around an excellent defensive ability, especially for PvP. This is going to be an anti-gank running Defensive Rune. Someone tries to gank you, they're going to stun themselves going for the gank. So there you have it, guys. The next ability we have down is Dark Exchange, morph to either Dark Conversion or Dark Deal. So this is a kind of trade ability. You trade 2,841 stamina for almost 9k health and 4,700 magicka. So this is 1 second cast time as well. It can be interrupted, so be careful when you're casting this so you don't get interrupted. We've got two different morphs here. So the morphs do pretty much the same thing in different ways. Dark Conversion is going to be trading stamina for health and magicka, whereas Dark Deal is going to be trading magicka for health and stamina. So it depends really what you need for your sorc, which one of these morphs you want to use if you need the extra sustain. For a Magicka sorc, for the most part, it's better to go with Dark Conversion, I think, as you will likely be running out of magicka faster, but if you have excellent magicka sustain, Dark Deal is also not a bad choice. All right, the next ability we have down is Daedric Mines, morph to either Daedric Minefield or Daedric Tomb. So we're not going to look at the base ability. We're instead going to look at the morphs because the morphs changed how the base ability works quite a bit. So we're going to look at the Daedric Minefield, which works very similar to the base ability, except you place 5 volatile mines around you instead of just 3. And it takes 3 seconds for those to arm, and if anybody walks over top of it, it'll explode and deal a lot, 7k magic damage and immobilizing them. This is a massive amount of damage for this ability, especially since it can hit a bunch of different players because it puts 5 mines down. So it's kind of like a single target / AoE skill. It strictly counts as, I think, a single target skill, but it works in the AoE sense that you can put a whole bunch of mines down to cover an area and really prevent people from moving through that area. So as you can see here in our dark magic tree, we have a lot of CC skills here, a lot of area control abilities, as well as some cool sustain skill as well. So let's take a look at the Daedric Tomb morph. What this does is it allows you to, it goes back down to 3 mines, so we're not placing 5 this time, but instead of placing it at your feet, you get to throw the mines wherever you want within a 25-meter radius, and it's the same deal. They're going to deal the same amount of damage when they explode and immobilize your target. So your 2 options for this ability is either do I want more mines around me when I place it, or do I want to be able to place the mines away from me, but then you can only place 3. But all in all, this is a very, very powerful defensive and offensive sorc ability. Camping your minefield is something that a lot of sorcs will do, and it's a very strong defensive technique against a melee combatant. So there you have it, guys. So let's take a look at the ultimate we have here. We have Negate Magic, morph to either Absorption field or Suppression field. So if you guys have not tried out Negate, this is probably the most powerful ultimate in the game. I really like this ultimate. What it does is you throw a large area of effect circle down, and what it's going to do is any enemies that are in that circle will not be able to cast any magic abilities. Now, if you hit NPCs with it and not enemy players, they will be stunned by the circle for a whopping 12 seconds. So if you're using this in PvE, it is a massive AoE 12-second stun. If you're going to use it in PvP, it is a massive AoE 12-second silence, both of which very, very powerful. The silence definitely cannot be underestimated in PvP. This is a really great way to help you wipe a group of players by using a negate field, not allowing them to cast their heals, not allowing them to support each other with their abilities by putting a negate on top of players. So what do these morphs do? Our Suppression field morph is going to deal damage to enemies standing in it, and our Absorption field morph is going to heal allies standing in it. So we have 2 different morphs for this ability. We get either damage with it or healing with it. And as you can see, it's a pretty decent damage tooltip on a 0.5 seconds. So it's quite a lot of damage that this ability will deal. So there you have it. And not just a lot of damage, but if you want to go for the Absorption field healing morph, it's quite a lot of healing that this ultimate will give you too. So very powerful ultimate. Definitely one of sorc's greatest utilities. Okay, so let's take a look at our passives and how they kind of synergize here. We've got Unholy Knowledge. Reduce Magicka stamina Magicka and stamina cost of your abilities by 5%. Absolutely amazing passive for a Magicka Sorc. As you know, many abilities cost a lot, so reducing the cost by percentage bonuses through our passives is absolutely fantastic for our sustain. Blood Magic. Hitting an enemy with a Dark Magic ability heals you for 9% of max health. So this is a pretty cool ability here. We can use our offensive Sorc kit here to actually heal ourselves if we use it right. We've got a lot of powerful offensive skills here. Now, the interesting part of this is that this is a percent-based heal based off of your max health. So the only way you'd really get a powerful amount of healing for this passive is if you had a very large health pool. So this is kind of a cool option for Sorc if you wanted to build a max health slash max Magicka Sorc. You'd find yourself fairly tanky when you're offensive because you'd be healing yourself for quite a bit by using your dark magic abilities. The next ability we have down is, or passive, is Persistence. Increase the duration of your dark magic abilities by 20%. This is just going to buff up all of the abilities that have a duration timer, including the ultimate, so can't be upset. And then finally, Exploitation. Casting a dark magic ability grants minor prophecy to you and your group, increasing your spell critical by 657 for 20 seconds. So this is a really good passive here. Minor prophecy is a great passive. It's going to increase our outgoing spell critical chance by around 3 to 4%. So that is awesome. We cannot overlook that. So I would really recommend that if you're playing a Magicka Sorcerer, you have at least one dark magic ability on either of your bars that you cast once every 20 seconds to make sure you keep up that major prophecy or that minor prophecy buff. So let's take a look at that Daedric summoning tree, guys. We're going to start with our first ability here, which is Summon Volatile Familiar. And then this is, so let's take a look at our first ability here. Morphs to either summon Volatile Familiar or summon Unstable Clan Fear. So these are both summons that you kind of have as a pet that walks around with you. In order to have the pet up at all times, you actually need to slot these abilities on both bars. If you do not have your pet slotted on both bars, when you swap bars, your pet will go away. So that's something you got to keep in mind when playing a Magicka Sorc, is if you want to use pets, which Sorc is a pretty cool class because it's one of the few classes that innately comes by pets in its class skill trees. If you want to use the pets, you can, but you do have to give up 2 bar slots, not just 1, to use a pet. So let's see what these guys do. The Volatile Familiar is going to fight at your side and deal shock damage with its basic attacks. Once summoned, you can activate the special ability, causing the Familiar to pulse for 4k shock damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. The final pulse will stun all enemies hit for 3 seconds. So this is a really good ability for a Magicka Sorc. Number 1, it's a pet, so it's going to passively deal damage to your target while you're using other skills. Number 2, it has a really strong ability. You activate it and it deals a pretty powerful shock AoE. It's only a 6-meter radius, so it's not like very large radius, but it's fairly powerful. It's going to hit every 2 seconds, and it's actually going to do an AoE stun on the final hit. So that's something that's very invaluable for a Magicka Sorc. Something you want to keep in mind if you use this ability on a Magicka Sorc is to try to cycle it every 8 seconds to make sure that you're taking advantage of the stun and the damage that you can get from an ability like this. So then we have the Unstable Clan Fear Morph. So this morphs the pet to do physical damage, and then once you unsummon it, it will restore you for a percentage of your maximum health, 35% of your maximum health. So this morphs the ability to physical damage, which isn't so great because we are, of course, a Magicka Sorc, so we're not going to be able to take a lot of bonus from that physical damage. That being said, the Clan Fear special ability, which heals you for a percentage of your maximum health, can actually be very useful for a maximum health Magicka Sorc. If you want to play a max health Sorc, this is going to be a great ability because it'll be a very powerful heal for you. 35% of your max health is a big chunk if you have 50 to 60k max health. So there you have it, guys. 2 very different morphs of this ability. The next skill we have down is Daedric Curse, morph to either Haunting Curse or Daedric Prey. This is a very, 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 very powerful ability again for Magicka Sorc. So we see kind of that trend in Magicka Sorc that they have very, very powerful single target magic spells. Not just single target, but very powerful in general Magicka abilities and offensive skills. So we're going to take a look at the 2 different morphs here. We have Daedric Prey. So Daedric Prey is going to function the same way as Daedric Curse. You use it on the target. 6 seconds later, the curse will explode, dealing 9k damage to the target and 4k damage to all other nearby enemies. And then while the curse is active, Daedric Prey increases the damage that your pets do to the target by 55%. Except the Storm Atronach, which only gets a 40% bonus because he's very powerful. So there you have it. So Daedric Prey is going to increase the damage that your pets do against that target. So if you want to play a pet-based Magicka Sorcerer, Daedric Prey is a great ability to put on your target, kind of mark it for your pets to deal a lot more increased damage to that target. And then we have Haunting Curse, which changes how the ability works. The cast time on it goes from, the duration of it goes from 6 seconds to 3.5 seconds. So now we only have to wait just over half the amount of time in order for the curse to explode and deal its damage. And then finally, after the curse explodes, it will continue to haunt the enemy and explode a second time after 8.5 seconds. So what this does is it turns your curse into a kind of shorter duration instant damage ability, and then gives it a longer duration damaging effect afterwards as well. So as you can see, this still does a lot of damage. We've got 9k tooltips on both of these curses, so this is going to be a very strong ability. Something that's very strong with Haunting Curse is that if you can mark a Nightblade with it, they're going to have a lot of trouble returning to stealth because the exploding curses will continually be pulling people out of stealth if you keep casting them on them. Alright, so the next ability we have down is Summoned Winged Twilight, morph to either the Matriarch or the Tormentor. So, let's take a look at the Matriarch. So, you summon the Twilight, it will deal shock damage plus an additional 15% damage. Once summoned, you can activate the Twilight Matriarch special ability, causing it to heal the Matriarch and up to 2 other friendly targets for 10.9k HP. And of course, the Twilight will remain until it's killed or unsummoned. That is a really big heal. Now, this is something that's quite strong because look at the cost of this ability as well. It's only 2,547 Magicka for a almost 11k heal that heals the Twilight, yourself, and potentially one other target. So if you're playing a pet sorc, this is a great heal for all you and all your pets. But as you can see, very powerful and quite cheap heal coming out of the Twilight Matriarch. So this is a very good option if you want to run a pet build, but you don't want to use the offensive pet because you already have an offensive kit that you like, but you're lacking a little bit of healing. The Twilight Matriarch is going to give you a lot of healing power. So let's take a look at the Tormentor. So this works in the same way, except once summoned, you can activate the Twilight's Tormentor special ability, causing it to deal 50% more damage to enemies above 50% health for 15 seconds. So this is an interesting morph because it greatly increases the outgoing shock damage that your Twilight will deal. So we have one morph of the Twilight that turns into a really powerful heal, and then one morph of the Twilight that turns into a really powerful kind of like never-ending damage over time ability. Not just that, but if you go for the Tormentor morph and then you go for the Daedric Prey, you can increase the outgoing damage of your Twilight by 105% plus the additional 15%, which would land me somewhere in the nature of a 9k tooltip on this Twilight's standard attacks. So they would deal a ton of damage if you set it up that way. So there you go, guys. Those are your options for that pet there. The next ability we have down is Conjure Ward, morph to either Empowered Ward or Hardened Ward. This is the Magicka Sorcerer's most powerful singular defensive ability in the game. Oh my gosh, it is also the most powerful shield in the game. It is a very, very, very strong ability. So let's see what it does here. Empowered, let's look at the Hardened Ward morph. So what it does is it gives you the base 16k damage shield. Something to keep in mind, guys, I have almost 50k Magicka on this character right now, so the damage shield is a little bit inflated. I also have no champion points placed on this character at the moment either. My champion points are all kind of in limbo. So we don't get to see the champion bonus that I'm getting on the Hardened Ward, but I could easily, I think, on this build, get the Hardened Ward tooltip up to 20k at 50k Magicka. I think that's fairly reasonable. Get it somewhere within the nature of 19 to 20k. So Hardened Ward is going to increase the damage of that shield by an additional 30%. So this 16k value will go up by a lot, making the damage shield effectively more resistant to burst because it's a larger shield. Now it'll only last 6 seconds. Now, the Empowered Ward makes the ward last for 10 seconds, but you no longer gain that 30% larger shield. So the shield is a little bit smaller, but it lasts a bit longer. On top of it, Empowered Ward will grant minor intellect to you and nearby allies, giving you an increase to your Magicka recovery, and Empowered Ward is a little bit cheaper. So here are your kind of options for that ability. Either you get the really, really strong Hardened Ward, or you go for the cheaper, kind of more sustain-friendly Empowered Ward. Not only is it more sustain-friendly in the fact that it's a little cheaper and gives you the recovery, but it lasts longer, so you will not have to recast it as often, ultimately leading to less stress on your Magicka bar. So in the last ability in our Daedric summoning tree, we have either Bound Armaments or Bound Aegis for our morphs here. So what these abilities are going to do is they're very similar to how the pets work. You have to have your Bound Armor or Bound Aegis slotted on either or on both of your bars in order for it to be effective. If you don't have it slotted on both your bars, you won't get you won't get the bonus when you swap to your other bar, and you'll lose the bonuses that it gives you, and you'll have to recast it when you swap back to your first bar. So your two options here, we've got Bound Armaments. That's going to increase your maximum stamina. It'll increase your heavy attack damage, which is kind of cool, but ultimately I think Bound Aegis for the Magicka Sorc is much the better option due to it increasing your maximum max Magicka value. As you can see, I only have Bound Aegis 2 on my Sorc. I have not leveled it up properly, so it only gives me that increased value of 5%, but once you get this to rank 4, it'll increase your max Magicka value by 8%. So that's really cool because this synergizes really well, of course, with Hardened Ward, which is going to be based entirely off of your max Magicka value only, right? So you can really bulk up your maximum Magicka on a Sorc using things like Bound Aegis, Inner Light, and Necropotence, sets like Necropotence, which give you a bonus for running pets. So that's exactly what I've got on my bar here. I've got one pet, I've got Inner Light, I've got Bound Aegis, and as you can see here, I'm pushing the 50k Magicka mark. And of course, you can see in my gear here, I am running a 5-piece Necropotence, which gives you a massive max Magicka bonus for having a pet active. Alright, so let's take a look at that ultimate ability in the Daedric summoning tree. We've got Storm Atronach, Morph to Charged Atronach, or Greater Storm Atronach. So these are your two options. Let's take a look at Greater Storm Atronach. It has increased duration, damage, and health. It's going to deal a flat amount of damage when it arrives. The Atronach cannot move, but it'll attack the nearest enemy for 15% more damage. An ally can activate the Charged Lightning synergy, giving them Major Berserk for 8 seconds. This is one of the rare few Major Berserk buff access that you have in the game. So if you throw the Atronach down for a friend, they're going to love you because that Major Berserk buff is insane. 25% increased damage. That's the most powerful damage buff in the game by far. So that's our first option there. Then we have the Charged Atronach option. So this will have a powerful area attack instead of the single target attack that the Greater Storm Atronach would have. You still get the stun when you put it down. Your allies can still activate the synergy for Major Berserk, but instead of having a single target attack, it's going to have an AoE ability. Alright guys, so let's take a look at these passives and see kind of how they synergize with Magicka Sorcerer. So we have Rebate, restore 1452 Magicka when one of your Daedric summoning pets is killed or unsummoned. This is great for a Magicka Sorc because it makes it, if you lose a pet, it's not that big a deal. You can get them back for fairly cheap because you return a massive, over half of the cost of the pet itself, just from this passive. So it makes the pet very cheap, cost about 1k for you to resummon if a pet goes down. We've got Power Stone, reduce the cost of your ultimate abilities by 15%. Absolutely excellent passive, very unique passive that only Sorc has access to. 15% reduced ultimate cost is absolutely massive. It makes Sorc the best choice. It makes Sorc have the cheapest ultimates across the board in the game, so it's very, very strong passive here. We've got Daedric Protection. Increase your health and stamina recovery by 20% while you have a Daedric summoning ability slotted. Now, this is great for the health recovery portion of it, and even the stamina recovery is great for Magicka Sorc, as you don't want to run out of stamina. Doesn't matter how much Magicka you have. If you have 0 stamina and you're knocked over, you are a dead man. So this is a great ability. It's going to give you a lot of passive effects just for slotting these things. Something to mention about Daedric Protection is that usually if you're slotting a pet or Daedric summoning ability, you'll likely have to slot it on the other bar as well. Just talking about the two different pets we have access to, and of course Bound Aegis. So that's going to give you those passive health and stamina recovery bonus just for using a pet. And then finally we have Expert Summoner. Increase your max HP by increase your max HP by 8% while you have a Daedric summoning pet active. So this is great for any kind of max HP stacking sorc build you want to play. You want to play a tankier sorc that has a lot of HP. Having at least one pet active is going to be very, very beneficial for that. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the last tree, the Stormcalling tree. We've got Mage's Fury morphed to either Mage's Wrath or Endless Fury. This is the Sorc Execute. This is a very strong execute, as it is kind of like a preemptive execute. What you'll do is you'll cast it on the enemy, and it'll deal the flat amount of shock damage that it would normally deal. And then if the enemy falls below 20% HP within a 4-second window, the explosion will happen, and you will deal a bonus 10k shock damage. That's the execute we're talking about. So this is a very, very strong ability. So the Endless Fury morph is going to return Magicka. You'll restore 2,850 Magicka if you kill an enemy with this ability. So essentially you make the ability free. Actually, it's not just free, it restores resources for you to get a kill with Endless Fury, whereas Mage's Wrath is going to increase the damage dealt to nearby enemies. We see a little bit of splash damage there. 10k upfront damage with almost 4k splash damage if you get that execute off. So there you have it, guys. You either have the AoE morph, or you have a morph that makes it basically free when you get the kill with it. This is a really strong execute because how it kind of works. What you're going to do is attack a target before they're within execute range. You're going to put this Mage's Wrath on them, and then after you Mage's Wrath them, you're going to hit them with a hard combo, hopefully dropping them to within that 20% window, and then the execute will trigger, allowing that hard combo that you just hit them with to proc the execute off of your Mage's Wrath. Alright guys, so let's take a look at the next ability. We've got Lightning Form morphed to either Boundless Storm or Hurricane. For a Magicka Sorcerer, I would not really recommend Hurricane. The reason I say this is because Boundless Storm is going to give you Major Expedition, whereas Hurricane will give you Minor Expedition. As a Magicka build, it's tough to come by Major Expedition. Stam builds have an easier time because Bow is going to easily give you access to Major Expedition just for having a bow equipped, whereas Magicka builds, you don't get Major Expedition from having a staff equipped. So I think Boundless Storm is the better morph for the most part for the sorc here. What it's going to do is give you the Major Expedition buff, increasing your movement speed. It'll give you both the Major and the Major Ward and Major Resolve, increasing your physical and spell resist by 5.3k. And, of course, it's going to zap nearby enemies around you, dealing 1 shock damage every 1 second for 20 seconds. This is kind of nice because if you're fighting a Nightblade at melee distance, this will pull them out, so that's pretty great. Hurricane is your other option here. Changes it to a stamina costing ability. It'll now deal physical damage instead of shock damage, and as we can see here, the physical damage is much, much lower than the shock damage off Boundless Storm. That being said, the shock damage off Boundless Storm isn't necessarily impressive either. I think Boundless Storm is more better of a buff ability than it is an offensive ability. Hurricane, on the other hand, being stamina morphed, even if it gets the 150% bonus, it's still doing less damage than Boundless Storm, and it's only giving us Minor Expedition. So I think Boundless Storm for Magicka Sorc is the better option. If you have access to Major Expedition already on your Magicka Sorc, and you'd like to be a little faster, Hurricane is kind of a unique way that you can get the Minor Expedition for yourself. Alright, the next ability we have is Lightning Splash, morphed to either Lightning Flood or Liquid Lightning. Lightning Flood, so the Lightning Flood has increased radius and the Liquid Lightning has increased duration. So it's really up to you which one you think you value more for this ability. Increased radius or increased duration. As you can see, the radius on Liquid Lightning is actually quite small. It's only 4 meters, so it's a very small AoE. It deals quite a lot of damage, 2.3k every 1 second. That is a very beefy damage over time tooltip. So very strong damage over time ability, regardless of its small radius. And then finally, an ally can activate the Conduit ability, dealing shock damage to enemies near the allies. So it pretty much gives them an AoE shock synergy activation ability. So it's really up to you which morph you'd want to go with for this ability. I would say for PvP, the radius is probably better as you want to cover more ground. And then when it comes to PvE, I think the duration is probably a better way to go as you'll deal more damage over time with it. So it's really up to you which one you want to use for what you're doing with your sorc. The next ability we have is Surge, morphed to either Crit Surge or Power Surge. This is a very, 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 very strong sorcerer ability. I really like Surge. It's very unique, and it's a very strong ability for the Magicka Sorc and Stamina Sorc. Sorc in general, it's a very good ability. The Critical Surge, So we got the two different morphs here, Critical Surge, Power Surge. Critical Surge is going to give us Major Brutality and not the Major Sorcery. Critical Surge, though, will heal us for a little bit more than what our Power Surge will every time we land a critical strike. So it's really up to you which one you want to go for here. If you have access to Major Sorcery already on your build, then Critical Surge is obviously the better choice as it has a little bit better healing. But if you don't have access to Major Sorcery, Power Surge is an awesome option because it's a great way to get Major Sorcery on your Sorc for a long duration, and it's still going to give you the Power Surge buff, so your crits will heal you as well. So it's really up to you which morph you want to take from here, but all in all, this is a very strong healing ability for a Sorc. It synergizes really well with Magicka Sorc, I would say, because what you can do is take some damage. Like, let's say you take some damage, you pop a damage shield, and then you just start attacking. And as you are attacking, your damage shield's getting worn away, but your Surge is going to heal your HP back while your damage shield gets worn away. So by the time you replace your damage shield, you should have healed yourself back up to full HP. Alright, and the final ability we have for the Magicka Sorc in our Stormcalling tree is Bolt Escape. Morph to either Ball of Lightning or Streak. This is Sorc's biggest and strongest stun / mobility skill in the game. So let's talk about Streak first. Streak is going to damage and stun enemies in front of you when you use this ability. So how this ability works, if you've never seen it before, this is that little lightning flash. A Sorc will just take a little bit of a step forward, they'll turn into lightning, and they'll teleport about 20 meters ahead of where they were before. So this is the Sorc teleport ability that teleports you forward. Streak is my personal favorite morph of this ability. It's not necessarily the best, but it's my favorite because it is a massive AoE stun. Only a 1.5 second duration on the stun, which isn't a long time, but it is still a stun. And it's a massive AoE. You can cover a lot of distance with a streak, and if there's anyone in between the location that you started your streak at and the location that you appear at, they will get stunned by it. So it makes it a very, very strong AoE stun. Not only that, but it has quite a beefy tooltip, 4,569 shock damage, so it's a pretty powerful AoE on top of it as well. And then we have Ball of Lightning, which changes how the ability works in kind of a different way. Now it will no longer stun. It will not stun anybody when you teleport through them, but what it will do is it will leave a ball behind in the location that you originally teleported from, and any ranged projectiles coming from that location will be absorbed into the Ball of Lightning. So what this does is absorbs projectiles for you for 1.8 seconds. This is a really great kind of defensive ability for a Magicka Sorc. What you can do is easily use Ball of Lightning to escape from a group of players, and you shouldn't take too much damage from the ranged attacks, as your Ball of Lightning will soak up a lot of the damage. So, as I said, guys, both of these morphs are awesome for the Magicka Sorc. Something to keep in mind is that if you spam Streak or Ball of Lightning, it will become exponentially more expensive to cast. So, just keep that in mind when you're using the ability. Try not to spam it too much. You can definitely do 1 to 2 or maybe even 3 casts in a row, but anything past that is going to cost you a lot of Magicka. So, be very careful if you want to make that choice to spend that Magicka or not in the fight. Okay, so let's take a look at the ultimate that we have for our Magicka Sorc. We have Overlord, Overload, morph to either Energy Overload or Power Overload. So what this ability does is it charges your fists with the power of the storm. Light attacks become lightning bolts, dealing 14k shock damage. Massive amount of damage off of your light attacks for Overload. This makes your light attacks incredibly deadly, and it makes your heavy attacks incredibly deadly AoE. Your heavy attacks will blast enemies in the target area for 5,712 shock damage. So it's kind of like the lightning flying out of Mr. Palpatine's hands at Luke Skywalker in Star Wars is what it will look like. And it covers a fairly big radius as well. So this is a really cool ability because it essentially turns your ultimate into free light and heavy attack, massive damage. The Power Overlord morph is going to increase the range and radius of the heavy attacks, whereas the Energy Overload morph is going to make your light and heavy attacks restore Magicka, but they'll have a little bit less of the bonus damage that they deal. So there you go. It's really It's really up to you which morph you want to go for here. Power Overload ultimately being the most powerful morph of this ability, whereas Energy Overload is still going to be very strong, but it's going to be a great kind of like respite. So if you are playing a Sorc and you find yourself running out of Magicka, you can pop Overload, Energy Overload morph, do some spam with your light and heavy attacks, return a whole bunch of Magicka to yourself. Of course, these aren't going to cost you anything but ultimate to cast. So once your ultimate's out, you successfully got hopefully a lot of Magicka back, and then you can keep fighting with your Magicka until your ultimate's down again, and rinse and repeat. And finally, something to keep in mind is that these light and heavy attacks that Overload changes your character to use, you cannot animation cancel them. They count as skill casts, so they share the same internal cooldown that, for example, your damage shield or crystal frags would share. So if you're casting your light attack, you have to wait a full 1 second before you can cast an ability like a damage shield afterwards if you're using Overload. And then finally, Overload's pretty cool because it unlocks a third bar for your character, and I'll show you guys kind of how that looks right here. So as you can see, I'm on this bar here, and when I pop my caps lock, go into Overload form, it opens up a third bar for me. And of course, because I am in Overload, it's just kind of replaced my third bar with the abilities that I already had on my original bar. But you can switch these abilities out, and you can make your third bar entirely unique from your original bar if you wanted. So you have essentially 3 different bars to cast from on your Magicka Sorc. So let's take a look at those passives, guys. We have got Capacitor. Increase your Magicka recovery by 10%. Absolutely awesome for a Magicka Sorc. Need that Magicka recovery, man. We've got Energize, increase your physical and shock damage by 5%. This is a very strong passive for Magicka Sorc. As you can see, we have a lot of shock damaging abilities in our Storm Calling tree. A Lightning Sorc is something that is very strong. We also have a lot of shock damaging pets as well, so, and a lot of shock damaging abilities and buffs on that we can put on ourselves too. So we have a lot of different shock damage coming out of a Sorc. So this is a really great passive for it. For the Magicka Sorc, and going the shock route on a Magicka Sorc is an excellent option because they will have the highest outgoing shock damage in the game. And then finally, we've got Implosion. This is a built-in Sorc execute. When you deal shock damage, you have a 6% chance to instantly disintegrate targets under 15% health, dealing 9k shock damage. And then, of course, it has its stamina counterpart as well. So what this does is it just gives you another very powerful execute to couple with your already very strong execute. Pretty much, this gives Sorc a double execute if they're using an execute. And if they're not using an execute, this gives Sorc a built-in execute that they don't have to slot that will just proc 15% of the time, or 6% of the time, sorry. And then finally, guys, we have Expert Mage. Increase your weapon and spell damage by 2% for each sorcerer ability slotted. This is a really good passive, too. It's really great because what it'll allow you to do is crank up your maximum spell damage higher than you would be able to on other classes, which is quite unique. It makes Magicka Sorc very strong. So as we can see here, Magicka Sorc has a really easy time stacking a lot of spell damage and has a really easy time stacking a lot of max Magicka as well. So Magicka Sorc is, well, it's a sorcerer. You would expect it to be one of the most powerful Magicka specs in the game. As for weapons for a Magicka Sorc, guys, it's really up to you what you want to use. Two-handed and dual wield are always good options if you want to have the increased spell damage on your bar. Dual wield, of course, will unlock another slot for you, whereas two-handed will not. And then, of course, destruction and restoration staves, absolutely fantastic for a Magicka Sorc. So they're a great option too. Two-handed is pretty cool because you could always go for the two-handed ultimate if you wanted to run it on a Magicka Sorc. The two-handed ultimate ignores all of the target's physical and spell resistance, so you would hit very hard with it regardless of whether you were a Magicka or a physical spec. As for destruction staves, guys, I would recommend Shock Staff for a Magicka Sorc. If you don't know what staff to use, you can probably start out with a Shock Staff. You'll see the best results out of that one. Fire Staff, also fantastic for a Magicka Sorc, and Frost Staff can also be great too, so it's really up to you guys. There you go. For the armor, I would say light armor is the best bet for a Magicka Sorc. You can always go with heavy if you like, but Magicka Sorc can stack such a high maximum Magicka value, giving it such massive damage shields that light armor is a really good option for it. It'll just help you keep those damage shields up, meaning that you can be very, very, very tanky in light armor if you stack those damage shields. Of course, stacking the annulment with Hardened Ward, giving me well over enough of a damage shield cushion to cover my entire max HP value, even in PvP. For our Soul Magic, Soul Assault's always a great ultimate if you want to use it on a Magicka Sorc. Very powerful single target ability. In our guild, we've got our Mage's Guild abilities here. I would recommend leveling up your Mage's Guild for your Sorc. You can see mine is not fully leveled up, only 8 Mage's Guild, such a noob. But we've got a lot of different Mage's Guild abilities. Major Sorcery if we're not using Surge. Fire Rune if we need more ground control abilities. And then, of course, Inner Light to buff up that maximum Magicka and give us access to Major Prophecy on our just by having it slotted. So Mage's Guild is absolutely fantastic for a Magicka Sorc. Meteor is going to be great for it as well. Fighter's Guild can work. Dawnbreaker of Smiting is really great because it's like an AoE kind of like player-based melee ultimate. It's quite cheap and it does a lot of damage. It's a really good option for a Magicka Sorc if you want to run it. I've seen a lot of Sorcs use it. It's really great for that AoE stun and AoE burst. Magicka Sorc, of course, having so much damage going out of it already, coupling an instant damage spike ultimate like this with it is very strong. And then, of course, guys, you want to get those Undaunted passives. You can use whatever Undaunted abilities you want. Bone Shield, of course, if you want to play a max HP Magicka Sorc, Bone Shield's going to be awesome for it. And there you have it. For a race for a Magicka Sorc, guys, I would recommend High Elf #1. The reason I say High Elf is simply because they get the biggest shock damage bonus in the game, which means that Magicka Sorc as a shock mage is going to be very, very powerful. Dark Elf, of course, is an excellent choice for a Magicka Sorc 2, as they do get the 9% max Magicka bonus. They do also get a little bit of a bonus to their shock damage too, but Dark Elf focuses more on the fire damage, which is not a bad thing. You can definitely use a Fire Staff on the Magicka Sorc and find a lot of success. And then, of course, we have Breton. Breton is going to be #3 for options on Magicka Sorc. I think Breton's okay, but ultimately Dark Elf or High Elf is going to deal more damage, making it kind of the more attractive damage-dealing option for a race. And then finally, guys, the last race that we're going to consider for a Magicka Sorc is Nord. And the reason I say Nord is because it gets a max HP value, so you can play an awesome HP Sorc, and finally it gets a 6% reduced incoming damage value. This 6% reduced incoming damage that Nord gets applies to your damage shields too. So if you want to build a tanky Magicka Sorc, I think one of the best ways to do it would be on a Nord. Alright guys, that is the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit of a chat on Magicka Sorc, and as always, if you liked the video, feel free to hit that like button, and I hope to see you guys next time.